Hello everybody, and welcome back to another drawing video. This video is continuing in a series of drawings that I've been doing for many years now at this point, which is going back through my old action figures and redrawing them in my current style, so that way if anything happens to them, I still have some sort of a trace of them creatively, that I've sort of memorialized their characters that I came up with when I was a kid into forms that I can carry with me into the future. This year in specific, since one challenge isn't enough, as you guys may have seen from one of my previous drawing videos talking about Project Power Ladder, I intend on showing you guys sort of the midpoint for this character for the month. So for each month this year, what I've been doing is drawing the same character in 3 different styles that represent 3 different sort of power levels or ways to view the character. So what I will do is I will start with the middle point, which is the one closest to the actual action figure, and then I will go backwards and design a simplified version of the character, and then go forwards and make a more complex or serious or grounded or eldritch version of the character. It's sort of all over the place. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just doing my free sketch. This one seemed to go pretty well. Things were sort of clicking into place as far as designs were concerned. There have been a few characters that I've drawn over the years that were part of this robot, which is sort of like a, I don't even know what to compare it to. It's like somewhere where Transformers and maybe like a Megazord from Power Rangers combine, where there's the actual main character that sort of turns into a machine, but then there are also like individual rockets that would attach to the sides that also have different pilots. So I've done a couple of those pilot characters over the years. So the way that I viewed this character was I wanted to go in a sci-fi direction, but I didn't necessarily want to do a pilot per se. I wanted to do some sort of a celestial navigator or something like that. It's more probably akin to something in Dune, where the character's outfit is a little bit more almost religious as far as garb, instead of just utilitarian. So I tried to combine some of the design aspects of how the action figure was put together and implement that into the design. So the strange sort of flat cap that the character's wearing is sort of like the underside of the plane. And then I loved the idea of having 2 sort of pauldron pieces that sort of arc up over the top of the character. I really liked that. And again, as far as just design is concerned, doing a sci-fi futuristic type character, but giving them an outfit that doesn't necessarily go with what you might think of when you think of sci-fi. I wanted to do something a little bit strange for like the main pilot character. So that's my pen sketch, and I was very happy with that first attempt. This is an exception to the rule. Usually I have to do a lot more sketches, but this time I was in a flow state, and that character was relatively easy to draw in my style for some reason. It just worked very well and wasn't that difficult. Part of it just could be the fact that for the middle power level characters, the poses that I choose are usually just a straight on pose, sort of doubling down on the fact that they're like the middle point. And then usually for the other 2 characters, I'll do something a little bit more wacky. But usually the level 2 character, if you can think about it like that, usually is pretty boring when it comes to posing. But you know what? I think it's a good way of showing that middle point and doing something a little bit more restrained. And it's also easier for me not to have to go look up a million references for poses. But you know, I could just be partially lazy, but that's what I've done since the beginning of this year, so that's what I'm going to keep doing. So obviously, as you can see right now, what I'm working on is the pencil sketch, and having that pen drawing right there is very nice, and then having the action figure off to the side is also helpful. I will just let you know, over the course of this video, specifically with the pen drawing into the pencil drawing, I kind of surprised myself at how similar they ended up looking to each other. And here's what I mean by that. Over the years, I've done a lot of drawings, and usually the pen version ends up being my favorite, because when I go to translate that into the pencil form, I cannot replicate the lines the exact same way that I did for the pen. And I don't know why that is, but sometimes, like in this instance, I was able to replicate it fairly well, and I think make some improvements. And I ended up being very pleased with how this design translated from pen to pencil, which, like I said, is honestly probably one of the most difficult things that I've found when it comes to character creation, is going from that initial burst of ideas, burst of creativity with the pen. You have this freedom, everything's flowing, and then you have to actually try to turn that into some sort of structure and planning. And with the pencil, sometimes, it's just not the same. I've mentioned it before in other videos, but pen and paper is pretty much my favorite, and I doubt that's going to be changing anytime soon. But this pencil sketch ended up going quite well, so I shouldn't complain. This one went better than I could have anticipated. So as you can see now, just making some of those refinements, looking at my pen drawing and trying to make changes to how the outfit looks. That's probably one of my weak points, to be honest, is like clothing design. Not only finding the texture and being able to represent that, or like if it's cloth, how does it sit on the body? Where do I put creases and folds and all that stuff? That's tricky enough for me just because I don't draw that enough. I'm not practiced enough with drawing clothing and materials of that sort, but also trying to figure out a balance between creativity and actual design for like outfits in ways that make sense. I don't even know if that sentence made any sense to you, but trying to marry the creativity of the character, because usually they're sort of an oddball, but then sort of ground it in what they're wearing, I guess, to make their outfit make sense. Because if the character's going to be weird and sort of out there, trying to ground it in that way, I guess, helps to sort of balance things out. So that way there's some believability to the design, and that you could look at it and go, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. Like, that outfit looks cool. But like I said, that's probably one of my weak points, just because I don't do it enough. I need to practice it more. But yeah, like I said earlier, honestly, I was very pleased with how seamlessly the character was translated from the initial pen drawing into the pencil, because that's not usually what happens. So I was very grateful. I also, when trying to draw sort of the tops of the characters and get some of the details up there, my head keeps leaking into frame because I have to crane all the way over the table because of where the camera is. So I apologize for that, but it is what it is. I did my best to keep my head out of frame, but it was tricky because once you get a certain distance away from the character, you can start making mistakes if your eyes are far enough away from what your hand is doing. And I know that seems obvious, but I've had full-blown drawings ruined because I essentially made like an optical illusion where I was drawing slouched over on an angle far away from my paper, and then when I went to move the paper, I saw the character sort of stretched weird. And yeah, that was never fun to try and fix. So here, moving on from the pencil design, I went in and decided to ink the character. Now, for this Project Power Ladder series that I've been doing this year, what I've done, in addition to changing up the style that I'm drawing the characters in and their poses and all that stuff, but I also vary my line width. So for the level 1 characters, or the simplest characters, I usually go with the thickest felt tip pen that I have, and I will usually make a complete sketch around the character. I will usually put an entire line work around the borders of the character because I want it to pop a little bit more and I want it to have a more cartoony flair. For this middle design, it's kind of, it's a little bit more balanced where I usually do go around the edges, but I'm using a smaller felt tip pen, and I'm also allowing my hand to leave the page so that way the line work gets broken up a little bit. That used to really bother me when I was a kid, when artists would do that. Specifically with like coloring books, it used to drive me nuts when I would see broken lines with like coloring books, because the whole point is for you to color within the lines to a degree. And whenever lines didn't meet up, that used to make me really upset. But now the way that I view it is sometimes it's helpful to break up the lines so that way the delineation between the character and the background is not so abrupt that they don't seem unnatural, I guess. Again, it also depends on what style you're trying to emulate, but I've found over the years that allowing yourself to have a lighter hand and a lighter touch when it comes to inking the outside of the character, sort of their silhouette, is helpful because it makes it seem a little bit more alive. The best way that I can describe it is some of the freedom and energy that you get from the initial pen sketch, you can sort of replicate that by breaking up your lines for your line art. I've seen the memes online before where it's talking about, you know, you have this amazing sketch and then when you go to do the line art, it looks terrible. And I think part of that is just because all the life gets sapped out of it. It becomes very uniform and sort of flat and sort of boring. And I think breaking up the lines really adds movement and energy and life to the character. And so for these middle characters, these level 2 power level characters, that's what I've been doing, and that's something that I've had a lot of fun doing. But yeah, so right here is the finished line art. Here I'm going in and just erasing all the pencil. Over the years, I've mentioned it before in other videos, but it took me many years to find the paper, the fine liner, and the eraser that would all work together in unison like this. And learning how much time to let the ink sit before erasing is crucial. I have ruined some of my drawings by trying to erase too quickly. But here is the finished line art, and again, very happy with that. Also very close to my original sketch, so I was pretty proud of that. Here is the coloring process, and luckily for that action figure that you guys saw earlier in the video, has a very simple color palette, I guess I could say. It's got a couple touches of blue and some yellow, but for the most part, it's red and white. So initially what I'm doing with this coloring stage is going in with a lighter red and sort of shading in everything that's going to end up being red, even though I know that I'm going to go back through with a darker color that has a little bit more maroon to it. But I'm just adding this sort of base tone of red, first of all. So that way, if nothing else, my specific shade of red is sort of special. There's nothing wrong with mixing what you're doing when it comes to color pencils, because sometimes you can come out with some very unique colors, but a lot of it is just, you know, trying new things and seeing what works. But with the action figure themed characters, I'm also trying to lean into their more simplified color palettes. When I was a kid and I would draw Captania creatures, which is this made-up world that I would draw for years, there wasn't a lot going on when it came to color palettes. The colors were kind of all over the place. And then after a couple years passed, I sort of overcorrected and I never colored in any of my characters anymore. Part of it was just for ease, because I would draw them practically everywhere and anywhere, and I just wouldn't go back and color them because that wasn't the intention. However, color really does add a lot to character design. Like, I know some of you are probably going, yeah, duh, obviously. But it really does give each character their own identity and helps them stand out from each other. And if you're like me and you're thinking about these characters in terms of like a connected universe where they all exist together, the idea of having multiple of these characters with their own color palettes in the same place always is cool to me, just because you get to see the contrast and you get to see the differences between the characters and their design. But I think it's been a really fun challenge for me when it comes to these action figures that usually have a very limited palette, to see just how much I can do with that limited palette, because it's a lot of fun. And ultimately, for this character, I decided to keep her skin tone white, the same as some of her robes and part of her hat. I just thought, in the moment, that makes the most sense. Again, going with that limited color palette and sort of leaning into the fact that she's some sort of like an alien navigator who's sort of in charge of the main body or torso and head of the ship. It just made sense to me. So then I was looking at the drawing and realized that I wanted to color in her eyes. I almost colored them in red, but then I changed over to blue, but just went with a much fainter blue because I knew I wanted to brighten the blue on her collar, and I didn't want them to be the exact same. And then give her like a little, I guess it's sort of like a face tattoo. She's clearly supposed to be some sort of an alien. It just makes sense for the large robot Titan character that she is piloting. But I was very pleased with how this character translated from the original action figure into the pen sketch, and how the pen sketch fed so well into the penciling and then the line work. And ultimately, I come back through and just add some details to the outfit, trying to just add some flourishes here and there, add some finer details, and just make a couple little adjustments. I wanted to give her more of a collar instead of just having her neck exposed like that. So I gave her just like a metal ring collar, which I've done for many characters in the past. It looks cool and almost has like an Egyptian pharaoh sort of vibe to it, but I thought for a space character, it would be cool to sort of delve into a more magic-y looking design for it. And I ended up being very, very pleased with how it came out. But I'm probably going to do 1 or 2 more of these videos, just showing going from level 2 into level 1 and from level 1 into level 3. So we'll revisit another character at a different power level next time. Bye-bye.